Hey y'all, welcome back to the Brianna Approved podcast. And today we are talking all about the science of vibes and what that actually means. In episode 70, we are going to be talking about things like emotional regulation and co-regulation of the nervous system. We will be talking about a phenomenon known as limbic resonance, as well as emotional residue. And we will briefly go over the heart-brain connection, which I have done an episode on in the past. And we will discuss why we rise to the occasion when we are surrounded by the right people, as well as how to increase heart coherence and how to raise those vibes. So I'm not going to wear these rose-colored glasses the whole episode, but I wanted you all to get the joke that we will be discussing the science of vibes and why it is literally so important to protect your energy and why you need to be around the right people. But before we get into the episode, let's start with our fun fact of the day while I sip cafe. Did you know there is a phenomenon known as emotional residue? This is the belief that people's emotions leave traces in the physical environment, which can later influence others or be sensed by others. So this phenomenon of emotional residue basically explains when you walk into a room and you could be like, oh, I could cut the tension in here with a knife right now, right? Like you walk in and you have no idea what's going on. So there was actually some research. It was done in the Netherlands, and they looked at this idea of emotional residue, and it looked at whether certain environments retained leftover evidence of past emotions, which could then sort of affect how you were perceiving what was going on and how you would actually feel. And what some of this research found was that the human nervous system can actually detect chemical signals. These chemical signals are called chemosignals that are left in spaces, which is why when you walk into a certain room, sometimes you could be like, ooh, the vibe is off, or ooh, the vibe feels really good. And they've actually found some of these chemochemicals in sweat and tears. So this is why, like, if you've left a really heavy conversation and you've walked again into some sort of environment, you could be like, it feels really heavy in here. So these chemo signals are actually found, like I said, in sweat and tears. And there were certain experiments, again, this was done in the Netherlands, that looked at exposure to these chemo signals. And what it did, it actually provoked an emotional response like fear or disgust, even in the absence of direct contact with the original emotional source. So, for instance, there were individuals who were exposed to fear-related chemo signals. These individuals, after they were exposed to it, they actually displayed fear-related behaviors like having this heightened alertness and even some facial expressions of feeling fearful. While exposure to these chemo signals linked to happiness actually induced positive emotional states in others. And again, there was also a later study that was done in the Netherlands that looked at healthy volunteers and found that exposure to body odor collected from people who reported a happy state induced happiness in the exposed participants. So, emotional residue. Be around good people, be around good vibes. Now, the next part of the show, we're going to get into the science about this a little bit more. We're going to do a little bit of a nerd alert in a bit, and then we'll actually talk about how to, quote, raise your vibes and what vibes actually mean. But I thought this was really interesting when I was doing research for the show. There's this theory called the Pygmalion Effect. And what the Pygmalion Effect does is it's this behavioral phenomenon that looks at the expectations that are placed on a subject, so placed on a person, and how that can actually impact their level of performance. So it looks and describes at how the beliefs and the expectations that teachers, let's say, or employees or authority figures, or kind of anybody that sort of you look up to or has a positive influence on you, how that can actually influence your performance and your behavior based off of, again, some of these expectations. And so when someone is expected to do well, they tend to perform better, generally meeting or even exceeding those expectations. Conversely, if somebody puts low expectations on somebody, especially if it's from somebody who you admire and respect, again, like a teacher, a mentor, something like that, that can lead to poorer performance as an individual. As an individual can actually internalize and conform to some of those beliefs. So again, it's not only just about the way that we believe in ourselves, but also the people that surround us, which again is really the theme of this whole episode of, yes, of course there is science, and we're going to get into that for why your environment is so important and the people you surround yourself with is so important, but also how we feel about ourselves and the rooms and the conversations that we put ourselves in to feel better. And so again, what this Pygmalion effect does is it explains that high expectations leads to high performance and low expectations leads to low performance. So those who have high expectations placed on them are more likely to internalize those expectations and improve their performance accordingly. So for example, my brother, who is the producer of this podcast, I feel like has high expectations for how I should be delivering the show. And so I internalize that before every show, and I want to rise to the occasion and I want to raise the bar every single time. Now, those who have low expectations placed on them, so let's say you're around somebody who's super negative, they're not doing a whole lot for their lives, they want to bring you down with them. That person is also more likely to internalize those expectations that was placed on them by somebody else. And this can actually weaken their performance. So basically, wanting to rise to the occasion and prove those expectations to people that we respect and admire were the scientific evidence that can impact why surrounding yourself with great people can have a positive effect on your life, and you will rise accordingly. So please, please, please surround yourself with people who want to see you grow and evolve and want to help level you up and make you have these moments of intellectual inspiration. And don't be around those energy vampires because they're bringing the vibe down and they are going to drag you down with them. You can't drown with everybody. Now, let's actually get into the science behind vibes and what this means. So we'll talk a little bit about energy and frequencies and how that kind of plays a role in the science of everything. So let's take a step back and think about somebody who you've literally like never even really chatted with them. But when you think of them, you could say, oh man, that person, just being around them makes me feel good. Or maybe people have said to you, you have just like this really positive energy about you. You're jovial and you're light. And I just feel better when I'm around you. That's also a really good temperature check of, how do I feel when I'm around this person? And how do I feel when I leave being around this person or this group of people? Are we feeling energized? Are we feeling drained? Are they a vacuum? Are they a battery? So I like to always do that. Like what is going on with me? How do I feel? So the term science of vibes generally refers to this idea that human emotions and behaviors and interactions can all be influenced by subtle energetic vibrations or frequencies. Because believe it or not, we are a living energy field. And our body is made up of all these energy producing particles that are constantly in motion. So, like everything and everyone else in the universe, you are vibrating and you are creating energy. So, this idea of the perception of good vibes and bad vibes is something that we might say like, oh, I don't know, it just feels off, or like, I don't know, something just isn't right. And yes, instinct is part of that, and there's the enteric nervous system, and we could go into all of that. But again, it's generally these strong instincts to subconsciously picking up on subtle facial expressions, perhaps. Perhaps there's vocal tones that change, intonation, just again, these little micro shifts in the environment, especially if you're an empath on any level, or again, you're just highly attuned to all of this. And so this really is explaining the brain's ability to cognitively process all these different sensory inputs, which ultimately helps you make a conclusion of the vibes are off or the vibes are feeling good. And this again goes back to energy and frequencies. So people who are proponents, or call them experts, quote, if you will, of the science of vibes, believe that all living beings emit and respond to, again, these subtle energies or vibrations. And these energy and vibrations are generally specific frequencies that can impact physical, mental, and emotional state. So when we're talking about that, I mean, I think people can equate frequencies to certain things like sound healing and, how EMFs emit certain frequencies. But again, for today's energetic vibrations, we're talking more about the body's energetic field or biofields if you wanted to do any more research on your own. So, certain practices like Reiki, for example, which I'm a big proponent of, and I think even acupuncture to an extent, there is generally some energetic biofield component that influences sort of the health and well being. And so when we're talking about vibes, the vibes being off, the vibes being on, the vibes being good, vibes are generally our rhythmic vibration that is occurring at various scales. So vibrations, you can think of them as a sort of a rhythm. So vibrations are this rhythm, and rhythms happen on a grand scale. So for example, seasonal changes and tidal patterns, but they also happen within our body in these tiny little movements within our cells. And so these vibrations include physiological rhythms like our heartbeat, like breathing rates, like our circadian rhythm. These are all example of physiological rhythms that we can actually see and feel and measure. But there is also much smaller vibrations that are happening inside of your body and then inside of each of your cells. Molecules in our bodies actually vibrate at characteristic rates. So, using atomic force microscopes, researchers have actually detected vibrations on a nanoscale, much smaller than 1/1000th the diameter of a single human hair. So, these are tiny little things that are moving around. And again, these vibrations generate electromagnetic energy waves. And those electromagnetic energy waves can influence cellular activities and thus overall body function with, again, these different rates of vibrations potentially altering cellular behavior depending on environmental conditions. And so, again, some of the research proposes that different molecules vibrate at different rates, and those rates can speed up or slow down contingent upon molecules that are changing. And if we want to kind of bring it full circle, what is actually the connection between our thoughts, our behaviors, and our vibrations? Because we know that what we're thinking can directly impact what is happening with our physiology and our nervous system. So, researchers have observed that thoughts, which ultimately influence behaviors, so thoughts and behaviors can impact the body's rhythms and these sort of subtle energies, frequencies, if you will. So, for instance, if you have an anxious thought, we're ruminating, we're spinning out of control, that can actually trigger the release of stress hormones that can stimulate your heart to speed up or slow down if we're trying to like talk ourselves off of a ledge. This is also why sound vibrations for music, so sound baths and music healing and listening to certain things at certain frequencies can actually affect your thoughts, your emotions, and your body systems on a very rudimentary level. Just think about a song that you like, that you play on repeat, that you're like, this has put me in a really good mood. Or when you're feeling sad and you want to continue feeling sad, you're like, I'm going to put some John Mayer on and really hit it deep. There's actually even some very specific hertz that if you Google them for binaural beats, you can listen to, let's say, before bed to help you relax and get into different brainwave states. So, you could do some research on that or potentially I'll do an episode. But again, sound waves, sound healing, all of that is kind of the idea of how that resonates. And so there's also a belief that certain frequencies can harmonize with or resonate with humans, and this can promote healing and balance and well-being. So this is called resonance and harmony. And again, all of this just basically is saying that vibrational energy, the thoughts we think, the people we're around, the environments that we're in, all of these things can affect our mood, our physical state, and then also just kind of your overall health. And again, I think you don't have to be an expert to understand that certain emotions and certain thought patterns, like when we feel joy and peaceful and we're feeling acceptance and we're feeling abundant, those create high frequencies, high vibes, high vibrations when you're having a high vibe day. While other things, like when you're feeling angry and you're feeling fearful and you're feeling despondent, perhaps, that literally puts us into a lower vibration. You might notice it with even the way that you talk or even the way that you hold your body language. Tony Robbins is a very big proponent of, I think he calls them power posture, something like that, where it's basically the idea of even if you're feeling in a low state, that if you just sit up straight and you roll your shoulder back and you speak from your chest and you change your tone a little bit, all of these things can actually raise our vibrations and have a direct effect on our physiology. So in conclusion, for this segment, make sure that you are being aware of what is going on with my vibration. How am I talking to myself? How am I talking with others? What's going on with my body language? What's going on with my posture and all of those things? Now, for the next segment of the show, I want to get into a nerd alert, nerd alert. And we are going to talk about why you need to be around the right people and environments, specifically because of something called nervous system co-regulation. I love this because actually my brother always jokes with me that whenever he comes home and we hang out, we'll be watching TV together or something, and I immediately just fall asleep. And it's because he has like a very calming energy, and I can obviously be a bit spastic. And so there is science to this idea of nervous system co-regulation, which refers to this dynamic process by which individuals can influence each other's physiological and emotional states through social interactions. I have talked a little bit about the idea of emotional contagion in the past. So emotions can absolutely be contagious. But again, the nervous system specifically looks at how relationships and social environments can impact our emotional well-being and also influence the stress regulation response. So being around a certain person can absolutely influence your physiological and emotional states, which is wild because I think once you realize the power of that and the science, you will become very, very perceptive and aware of who you not only allow in your energetic field, but who you want to share your energy with, because your energy is a gift to others, and do not undervalue the power of that. And I will die on that hill. Now, the science of co-regulation, again, looks at this interplay between the autonomic nervous system, so the brain structures that are also involved in emotional regulation, and then again, the role of social bonds in human health. And the nervous system is interesting because nowadays everybody's like this nervous system healing coach and everything goes back to the nervous system. And I agree with that on some level, but I also don't think it's a catch-all for everything. And this healing your nervous system, it's like it's not happening overnight. But what we do know is that the nervous system is complex and it's delicate at the same time, kind of like me. And co-regulation and co-regulating the nervous system basically serves as this precursor to self-regulation. I'm going to say that again because it's important. So when we co-regulate with certain people, this generally, of course, is happening at a very young age before we're aware. Our parents are generally the first people we co-regulate with. This can influence how we self-regulate later in life. So for example, if you grow up in a household that is so chaotic and every time something happens there's a big explosion and you see that mirror and example of somebody how they're regulating, there's a good chance that later in life you think that is the normal way, or that becomes your normal way to self-regulate. Now, is that good, bad, or indifferent? We don't know. You'll be unpacking that in therapy for a very long time, or you'll be blaming your parents for a very long time and not changing anything. However, we know that, again, to make that full circle, human infants specifically are highly dependent on caregivers for survival. So the emergence of, again, that self-regulation occurs within a relational developmental context. So yes, there are certain things we can't control that happened in our childhood. But again, as we get older, we can absolutely have a say in who we co-regulate with. And I want to just take a step back because we're talking about co-regulating the nervous system, the central nervous system. And for those of you who don't remember, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and it basically integrates information it receives from the brain and the spinal cord, and it coordinates and influences pretty much all the activities to all parts of our body. So the idea of co-regulating the nervous system is really this multi-level phenomenon that takes place, yes, at a hormonal level, but also at the sympathetic nervous system level. So that body's fight or flight response, and the autonomic nervous system, which controls our involuntary bodily functions. So things like breathing and heart rate without us consciously knowing. Have you ever had a crush on somebody or been newly dating and you're like laying on their chest and you're trying to regulate your breathing with them and you're like, am I going to have a heart attack right now because I can't co-regulate with this person? But again, so co-regulation is basically looking at the interplay between the sympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, our hormones, right? And how all of that is actually working at a neurobiological level and how that ultimately is playing out to our interpersonal behavior. So how we react. And co-regulation really is sort of this tool, if used properly, that can help us feel calm. Because, right, think about it. Think you had a really bad day and you're just like, I just want to be around this person because when I'm around them, I feel good, right? Like I'm picking up on their vibes and picking up on their energy. My nervous system is regulating with them and you feel connected. This is the science behind that. While at the end of the day, or let's say you had a real shit day and you're like, I can't go to this event. I can't be around these people. I can't be in that energy because your nervous system knows what's up way before you know what's up. So again, it's this tool for calming and connecting the nervous system, especially during times of distress. And again, it helps us to sort of create an environment of safety and understanding through a phenomenon called limbic resonance, which we will talk about in 1 second. But this is basically the idea of sharing emotions between two or more people. So the shared experience of connection can help people regulate their nervous system and actually reduce feelings of stress and feelings of anxiousness. So when we talk about limbic resonance, this describes the capacity of humans for sharing emotional states. So it refers to an individual's ability to resonate with another emotion, with other emotions of another person on the central nervous system level, even when they're not directly expressed. So again, you're around somebody and you're just like, what's up? Something feels really off right now. We're having this limbic resonance. I could feel like there's a subtle shift in your energy. And so the state of limbic resonance, it's interesting because it actually does involve the dopamine circuit reward center promoted by feelings of harmony and empathy, as well as the norepinephrine circuit that deals with things like fear, anxiety, and anger. So you can kind of feel it on both ends of the spectrum. If somebody is, again, feeling really happy and they're in this harmonious state, as well as if they're feeling super anxious and kind of pent up. And so if people are surrounded by people in a dysregulated state, it quite literally directly affects our biology. And over time, our nervous system can become dysregulated as well. And so again, limbic resonance has truly thought to have evolved in order to help us foster social bonds between individuals and then kind of cement relationships within a species, if you will, or even between different species. Because again, like back in the day, many moons ago, you were either like, are we good with this person? Are we not good with this person? Do we like them? If, let's say, this is why when people go to another country, this actually happened when we were in Italy, my dad, my brother, and myself. My dad doesn't speak a lick of Italian. And we were I don't remember what part of Italy, but these two people, they literally just had like an instant bond because their heart had like this connection and they could just pick up on each other's good vibes and this emotional resonance. And it was just really sweet to be like, they were both so excited about it. And it was like, you saw that in real time. And again, how people can literally impact your nervous system. So again, co-regulation basically helps to shift our nervous system into a calmer, more regulated state of being. It helps us to be mindful and aware of our own emotions as well as others because our emotions can absolutely impact others. And as always, your energy is a gift and a privilege to have access to. And not everybody is privy to that. So be very, very aware, do an energetic audit of whose energy you want to be around, but who you want to actually give your energy to as well. Okay, so I also want to kind of touch on the idea of like heart rate variability. So this actually looks at how individuals can achieve something called physiological synchronization, where their heart rates and other physiological measures become aligned, which is interesting. And there's also a phenomenon known as neuroimaging studies that looked at different areas of the brain that can become active that regulate our emotions, like prefrontal cortex, amygdala, all of those things when we're around certain people, how those can become active or deactive. So I just think it's really important. And even the idea of mirror neurons, so these neurons that can activate when an individual is performing an action and we observe that and we want to do the same thing. So just being aware of that. Now, how co regulation actually works, and then again, we'll try and finish up the show with a little bit about heart brain connection and how to raise those vibes. But again, during social interactions and when there's that idea of emotional resonance, so for example, when we are interacting with people and environments and all of that, we have this subconscious synchronization that is happening with our physiological state. So a good pause for you could be a body scan, as they say. I don't love that term, but it's true, of this idea of like what is actually going on with me when I am around this person. I dated somebody once that literally every time I hung out with them, I got the worst stomach ache of my life. Changed nothing with my diet. Like my body literally rejected their energy, could not physically stand them. Same thing when I tried to like sleep next to them. Like I would literally feel anxious. So just do a quick check-in and a body scan of what's going on with me, what's happening with my heart rate when I'm around them, am I breathing differently? Like how am I feeling, right? Because there's actually physiological states that can change. Also, things like facial expressions, body language, these are all nonverbal signals that are very important, seminal, if you will, in communicating different emotional states. And again, fostering some of that emotional attunement between individuals. And then again, understanding the phenomenon of emotional contagion. So one person's emotions and behaviors can trigger similar emotions and behaviors for better or worse. So being around high vibration people versus low vibration people, those energy, super negative people, pro-inflammatory people, as I have talked about for years. So just being aware of mutual regulation of the stress response. Again, because when two people interact, their autonomic nervous system responses can actually become synchronized. So there was some literature that talked about how a caregiver and their soothing behavior that can actually lower a child's heart rate and stress hormones, promoting a sense of safety and calm. So we love that. Now, to close out the show, I just want to do a quick reminder about the heart brain connection. I've done a whole episode on this, but because of the field of neurocardiology, we know that the heart actually has its own emotions, and the human heart possesses about 40,000 neurons. And the heart's energy can reach about 3 feet outside of the physical body. So, again, this is why when you walk into a room, you could just be drawn to somebody, or you're just like, oh my God, their presence is just so infectious. I have to be around this person. And again, because of this intrinsic cardiac nervous system, or basically the heart's nervous system, this is why we can feel drawn to something and why we have to be aware of something called the heart brain coherence, which is basically when the heart, mind, and emotions are in energetic alignment and they're all cooperating and they're all playing nicely. And again, this sort of helps us build up some of that emotional resilience. And so when the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems are out of sync, again, from lower vibration emotions like anger, anxiety, frustration, this can actually put us into more erratic rhythms or incoherent states as opposed to coherent states. And what happens is the brain receives input from actually the heart, which is wild to think about. And then you can have actual physiological symptoms. And so again, this heart coherence, if you will, is the ability to pick up on data in another person's kind of heart space, if you will, beyond what the person has actually verbally shared. So whatever the heart informs the brain responds accordingly, which is why, people say things like from the bottom of my heart and like, what is your heart telling you? You got to listen to that stuff. And so, in the same way that we can build mental habits, we can actually build new heart habits. So, just like the brain can retrain through neuroplasticity, we can actually increase heart coherence. And I do think that this takes a little bit of practice because it involves trusting yourself a little bit and understanding how to listen to your emotions. But again, there was some literature that looked at a patient-doctor relationship. And it was a patient who was holding back fear. They were very fearful about something. And the physician was very calm and tranquil and very, like, we're going to be okay, and had a sense of equanimity to them. And that actually change the physiology of the patient. So just being around somebody who's calm, this can actually, being around somebody who's optimistic, somebody who, again, just has a good vibration. So some ways to actually stimulate some of this heart brain coherence is, again, staying focused and bringing attention to your actual heart space. So placing your hand over your heart for a physical connection, like actually being present, slowing down for a minute, and checking in with yourself with like, what's going on with me? Also, bringing something to mind that makes you just feel joyful and thankful, right? That because the heart can influence the brain, that literally can change our physiology. So you could think about spending time with your favorite person. You can also just imagine how you want to feel. So I know that sounds hippy dippy and granola to some people, but the idea of positive psychology and positive thinking, just actually having a positive mindset, imagining what it would feel like to be calm, to be happy, to be around people that I love being with. And then just trying to work in some more of those positive emotions, doing those sort of thought audits, if you will, challenging your thoughts again, and just really trying to bring it back to the heart. And last but not least, to round out the show, because we started off the show talking about change, what is actually vibes and energy. And so, yes, you could do some cool things like Palo Santo and saging and all of that. I think those have kind of become very famous on social media. But again, actually changing your vibrational energy. There is some very good research on things like outdoor immersion, so spending time nature therapy, practicing higher frequency emotions like gratitude and optimism, deep breathing meditation. That one doesn't really always do it for me. Therapeutic touch, so things like Reiki can be very helpful. I do always tell people you have to be in a place to receive Reiki, but I absolutely believe in it. And there is obviously science to support this. This is my favorite way to change my vibrational energy. So if you're having a low energy day, you're having a low vibration day, there's a theory called generosity helpers high theory, which basically is said to raise your vibrational energy because it is considered a pro social behavior. And so not only can it, yes, impact your vibrational energy, there is some research, there was a study done in 2013. It was called Giving to Others and the Association Between Stress and Mortality. And it found that generosity may potentially prolong your life by shielding you from the harmful effects of stress. And again, the helper's high, what this does, so like you do something nice for somebody with nothing in return. My dad is the king of this. I'd put myself in that category too. But this actually helps to light up the brain's reward systems. It helps us to have positive feelings of emotions. It can help actually change our physiological state. So do something kind for others if you're having one of those days where you feel like it's low energy. And it doesn't have to always be monetary. You can give a kind word. You can give a compliment. You can give a smile. All things that are free that can be considered a helper's high. And then last but not least, like I said, grounding. So walking outside, getting those bare little feet in the ground, chakra therapy. There's definitely acupuncture can help, Reiki. And then I think even certain things like, certain crystals. And again, just like being around good people, doing an energy audit. Do I like myself? Do I like the version of myself that I am when I'm with this person or these people? Like, how do I feel? How does my body physically feel? How do I mentally, emotionally feel? Do I feel drained? Do I feel energized? Do I feel inspired? So all of those things I think are going to help to raise your vibes, raise the energy. Again, emotional residue, why we can feel something when we walk into a room. We also want to make sure that we pay attention to that idea of the Pygmalion effect. So being around people who have high expectations of us that we value and appreciate, we will rise to the occasion, understanding that we are a living energy field. And so these energetic vibrations and frequencies and these biofields can directly impact our physiology. And then again, there's absolutely a connection between our thoughts and our behaviors and how that impacts the nervous system and being around the right people so we can optimize co-regulating the nervous system. Now, I hope you all have some amazing vibes after this episode. I can't wait to hear what you do to get those vibes high, and I will see you next time. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Pew! Like these? I got these off of Amazon. What am I going to do with this now? Bye, guys.